This is Hospitality and Politics, powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. I am Andrew Ridgie, and I am here with Grace Young. Hello, Grace.
Hello, Andrew.
I am very happy you're here because we've been trying to schedule this, and we've had a couple of dinners together, and we've had good conversations. But this is the opportunity where I'm really going to get to know you.
Oh, no.
I was actually thinking before, because when I was just kind of getting ready for this, your nickname, I guess, is the Stir Fry Guru.
I have several nicknames. Stir Fry Guru is the name that came from the New York Times.
Okay.
I'm also known as Wok Queen, Wok Therapist, and the accidental voice of Chinatown.
That's amazing. So that's actually a good way, because I was going to say award-winning cookbook author, culinary historian, filmmaker, Julia Child Award, the James Beard Foundation's Humanitarian of the Year Award, USA Today Woman of the Year, and your work to help save America's Chinatown. So that's pretty amazing, because when I was just going through doing some research in advance of this conversation, I'm like, wow. But I always like to know, who is Grace Young in Grace Young's own words?
Oh, my God. Well, all of the humanitarian work for America's Chinatowns just began in the last years, starting with COVID. So before that, I was known for my cookbooks, and specifically in Chinese cooking, stir frying, and in wok cooking. And then I ventured a little bit into doing cooking videos. I guess that was in 2017, 18, 19. And that was an extremely exciting time to find this new medium and new way of expression. And I only did 3 or 4 videos, I think, with a young filmmaker named Harrison Jeffs, who's super talented. And it was really amazing, just 2 people creating these videos. And the last video that we did is called The Wok Therapist. Okay,
that's what I was just going to say, because I was looking down to make sure I had the name. It's hysterical.
It's a really, I have to say, I think it's really charming. And it's all based on what happened to me of accidentally becoming this wok therapist, because people who get my books or know about me, have taken classes, inevitably will send me emails or messages on Instagram or Facebook, or it used to be on Twitter. I just got a wok, really intimidated. I just seasoned it. Did I do it correctly? Should I throw out the wok? Should I start all over again?
It's hysterical. And it's wok envy you're talking about on there.
Yes.
And it's such a well done piece. People should definitely watch it. And I know, because when I was seasoning my wok, I remember we used I think it was avocado oil, maybe. And there was a little clump in it. So there's a little bump in it. And I was like, oh, it just wasn't perfect. And for some reason, I don't know why I'm saying this in public, but, scratched it off. And then it looked more ruined. Then I tried to re-season it again. I was like, you know what? Who cares? I just need to start using it and cooking with it.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's
But originally, I just would answer questions. Did I do this correctly? Yes, you did it correctly. What should I do now? And then I would explain. And then gradually, I was always up late at night answering these questions. And I started saying, don't be so judgmental. Or after you've cooked with your wok and you washed it and it looks like you scratched it or something with the spatula. It's just like life.
Oh yeah, and then you have things, you wipe it with a napkin, a paper towel,
and it looks a little brown. Oh no, is that rust? So people are panicking and they're very anxious. And I realized that I was really a therapist, that I just had to sort of calm them down and just say, we have good days, bad days. Sometimes we don't look so good, right? Just keep going. Just keep stir frying.
Kindred spirits. I always joke around that my real job is being a restaurateur therapist.
Yes.
Because restaurateurs reach out with all their frustrations and all their concerns, anxieties, and try to help them. And sometimes it's the same thing. Let's just take a deep breath and let's work through this. And I love to see that you are a Wok Therapist.
Yeah, but you don't have the term wok obsessive compulsive disorder.
No, but I did see that in the video.
Yeah.
So what's your background? How did you get into food and the history of
Wow.
food. And,
Oh my God.
I'm always just fascinated, like what's like the birthplace of this interest and passion? Was it something you were born into later in life? Did you just go like, oh, I'm really interested in this?
I was born into it. My parents are Cantonese.
Mm-hmm.
They passed away, were Cantonese, and they were obsessed with good food.
Oh, wow.
Everything had to be fresh. They were incredible home cooks.
Mm-hmm.
Never went to culinary school or anything like that, but just had such a desire for eating good food that they had an excellent palate. And so I grew up eating amazing food, and they shopped every day. My father was a liquor salesman, and the main clients were in Chinatown. So he would inevitably get to Chinatown every day in San Francisco. And in addition to calling on his clients, he would notice that the fish looked particularly good, or he saw that the shipment of baby bok choy had just come in from the farm. So, I grew up with great food. And then when I'm not sure of the age, but I believe under 10 years old, I discovered Julia Child on TV. And I was just mesmerized by her. All my other friends were watching shows like the Beverly Hillbillies or whatever, Hogan's Heroes. And my favorite show was The French Chef. And everything that she was cooking was foreign to me. I had never seen brioche. I had never seen roast lamb, right? Or a souffle, a salad niçoise. And I would send a self-addressed envelope to WGBH. And that's how you did it in those days. And they would send you the recipe from that week.
Wow.
And I don't know how I saved the money to go and buy the paperback version of the French Chef cookbook. And then I asked my mom if I could cook from it, and she let me. And the first recipe I made was brioche, and it was perfect.
Yeah.
And that's a very ambitious recipe. It calls for yeast. It's complicated for a child who's never done baking. And my mother was Cantonese, but raised in Shanghai. So she was exposed to French bakeries, an international community in Shanghai. And so I remember the aroma that filled the kitchen. We didn't have a glass door on the oven. And then when the buzzer finally went off and we opened the oven door, they were perfect.
Yeah.
They were golden. They were
Beautiful.
puffed. And I remember the look on my mother's face of like disbelief. And when she bit into this buttery, gorgeous brioche, that it was just perfect.
That's amazing.
And I think every child wants to impress or please your parent.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait to make another recipe and another recipe.
Well, it's so great. I mean, I just think like being with food, there's just something that's so human about it. And that's why I wanted to know kind of you in your own words. And it makes so much sense now seeing some of the work that you do now, because there is that continuation and that fascination from being, a child about food and the processes for preparing it and serving it and, getting positive feedback. We had talked about it briefly at our dinner not too long ago, but my family, going back to my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my aunt, had bakeries. And the last one my aunt sold when my daughter was young. And she is like upset now because she wanted to be able to work there like the rest of the family, growing up. But she's continued this fascination with cooking, but she loves baking. And I watch her, and you could see the interest in the recipes and, the measurements and then the excitement of when it's done and tasting it and it comes out great. They're like, baking can be a sign. So if you get something off, it doesn't rise properly or the consistency of it is a little bit off. But it's just such an important thing, I think, as a child growing up and being exposed to food and preparing it. It adds a lot of texture and culture,
and meaning. Yes.
And meaning. So Cantonese, let's talk just a little bit about cuisine, because I want to get into Chinatown restaurants and small businesses and what's happening there. But, can you talk just a little bit in general, like the state of Chinese cuisine in New York City? It could be Chinatowns around the globe as well. Like, what is the state? Is there like new Chinese restaurants that you think are doing it really well? Are there the traditional old restaurants that have been around for decades that are like a must go to? Is it having a moment? Does there need to be a energy into it? What's happening in the world of Chinese cuisine and restaurants?
So I've really focused my energies on Manhattan's Chinatown since COVID. Mm-hmm. And the reason I have is because since COVID, historic Chinatowns all across the United States are suffering right now. So here in New York City, we have like 9 different Chinatowns, supposedly, right? From Sunset Park to Flushing. But Manhattan is the historic Chinatown. And the other Chinatowns are doing very well because they are supported by locals. The historic Chinatowns in Manhattan, San Francisco, Boston, Philly, they are dependent on tourism. Mm-hmm. Manhattan's Chinatown is dependent on the financial district, which is adjacent. Yeah. For a long time, the workers weren't back. The court system, everyone ate in Chinatown for jury duty. That was not back to normal for quite a bit during this COVID period. And so my love and concern is for the historic legacy restaurants. Mm-hmm. And as you know, the first Chinese immigrants to come to this country were from southern China, from Canton. And that was the first cuisine America discovered. And these legacy restaurants are really at risk right now.
Yeah. So obviously, like we said, some of the factors why they're at risk. Are there things that could be done to help support them? Through the hospitality lines, we're always advocating for restaurants. So what kind of government policies from a city, state, federal level could help support them? But then there's also just things like New Yorkers and visitors can do, like going out and eating. And when you go to a restaurant, you go to the tea shop or another store and you buy something. But when you're talking with people and you're talking with local restaurants and other small businesses in Chinatown, what are some things that you suggest could be done to help these businesses, hopefully not just survive, but, thrive and not feel the pressure to close?
Right. So all the businesses in Chinatowns across this country are under threat right now because they're mom and pop businesses. And they're all dealing with rising rents, inflation, tariffs, which deeply impact Chinatown businesses, dramatically decreased tourism. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, the constant threat of gentrification and redevelopment. Yeah. If you look at Manhattan's Chinatown right now, I feel like every other day it feels like there's a new bubble tea store. Yes. And they're not just bubble tea stores. They're big corporate bubble tea stores from China and from Taiwan. So I think when people go to Chinatown, they have some favorite restaurants, but a lot of people don't know the story behind these restaurants. And they don't know what to appreciate about them, right?
So who are like examples of the people that own these kind of historic, real, authentic, Chinatown restaurants? Because I love the restaurant industry so much. I saw it in my family, but you see it in all families. Like, it is the history and the story of immigrants or people that came here with nothing and created something that they've been able to pass on for generations. So are there like any stories or examples of like, who are the people that opened and are still running some of these restaurants? Like did they just come here and open a restaurant, or what was their evolution to where they are now?
I don't know the history of that side of Manhattan's Chinatown. I was not born in New York City's Chinatown. I know that for San Francisco's Chinatown, my relatives had some of the restaurants there. But I actually got to meet Bayark Lee. Do you know who she is?
I know the name.
She was one of the original stars of A Chorus Line.
Okay, wow.
And so we met in Chinatown because she was going to do a little video for me to remind people to support Chinatown in the middle of COVID. And she said, let's meet at WoHop. And she said that her father was one of the original owners.
Wow.
And Wohop is the second oldest restaurant in Chinatown. It dates from 1938. It's beloved by so many New Yorkers.
Indeed.
You talk about favorite Chinatown restaurants. So many people will say, my family brought me to Wohop from the time I was a child. It was my grandfather's favorite. There are people who came to New York in college. And of course, it was one of the most inexpensive late night. I think Wohop used to be open almost 24 hours. It was insane.
They were. And I think maybe that was a pandemic change, which, impacted a lot of businesses, a lot of restaurants. Chinatown Diners is a big example. A lot of the Greek-owned diners that were always 24/7. But anyways, back, to Wohop.
So, prior to COVID, I think Chinatown restaurants were closing maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. But nowadays, Chinatown restaurants sometimes are closing at like 8:30. Yeah. If it's in the middle of the winter, it's really cold weather. The customer, the customers just aren't there. Yeah. So it's really heartbreaking. But it was really cool to be there with her at Wohop and to hear, I believe she said to me, that her father didn't even go to the opening of a chorus line because he was working.
So,
and Baek Lee was a child Broadway star. She was discovered for The King and I when she was like 5 years old. So she did A King and I, Flower Drum Song. She has this like really storied Broadway career. And then just to hear that her father never got to see opening night because he was working.
Well, there's so many of those old family-owned, businesses where the lifestyle was so tough because you're working nights, weekends, holidays, and it's the nature of the business. And I also think one of the things that happens, I imagine, restaurants in Chinatown, but I think you see it in a lot of family-owned businesses, particularly when it comes to restaurants, the next generation or the generation after that may not be taking over the business. It may be, in a lot of cases, it's like, the first generation to go to college and they're going to do something else. But I always do find it fascinating and love and kind of heartwarming how so often the kids, you go into a restaurant, you see the kids there and, they're like doing their homework after school. And that's obviously really tough. But at the same time, there's also something I find moving and important and, they're helping, the parents. I've heard so many stories of it's like, my parents, didn't know, weren't, tech savvy and we created the first website, or we were translating, things for them. Because again, like you were saying in the beginning, family owned, these historic restaurants, they add a lot of culture and authenticity and fabric.
They're living history.
Truly are.
And they are an enduring symbol of the American dream.
Yes.
Right. An immigrant comes to this country with almost nothing. Yeah. And then just through sheer backbreaking work, all of these owners, when you talk to them, they were waiters, they were bus boys, they were doing house cleaning, they were delivery boys, just saving every penny to open up their little business.
Well, we recently, our mutual friend, Drew Kerr, was doing these incredible Welcome to Chinatown dinners. And he started as we were coming out of the pandemic to basically get people from around the city and that were even visiting to go visit, support a local Chinatown restaurant. And it was so nice because we shared a few of them together, but you'd meet all these different people from Drew's life. Some of them you may have known, others you're meeting for the first time. And to meet in a different great restaurant, get to hear the story was fantastic. And we had one I'm just thinking about, which was Hop Lee.
Yes.
Which was terrific. And there was a dish which was like pickled mustard greens.
Yes.
What was that? That was one of the best dishes, and I've never had it before.
So Hop Lee just turned 50 in 2025. Wow. So it's one of the old legacy restaurants. And this is one of their signature dishes, beloved by the community. There's only 2 or 3 restaurants that still know this recipe, and they take mustard greens, and it takes 4 to 5 days for them to pickle it. So it's done in-house, and then they stir fry it either with beef, squid, or thinly sliced fish cakes. And it is so refreshing.
It's great.
The texture of the pickle is really just crisp and light and fresh, right?
I keep thinking about it. Yeah, and I was thinking of like a great, like a summer dish too. I could eat it all the time. It was, you're a food person, but I guess it applies to everyone because everyone's a food person. It's like, when you have a dish that you haven't had before and it's like a new flavor,
right.
It was really incredible. And I've been thinking about it.
And it's extremely inexpensive. Yeah. It's just shocking when you go to a restaurant at Hopley, like Hopley.
Yeah.
When you see the bill at the end, it's just sort of hardly possible. I always think to myself, like, how are they making money?
Well, that's an interesting, and I don't know, you're on like the business side. One of the things that I, talk a lot about is pricing and just like, you have the value perception of customers. Are they getting good value for what they're paying for? But then also, types of cuisines, there's a value perception. And I think in some cases, and I've heard other people talk about it, when it comes to like Chinese food, obviously there's, more expensive Chinese restaurants, but generally speaking, you think of it as more of an inexpensive cuisine sometimes. People are going to pick it up quick, or it's going to be takeout or, delivery. And you want to be affordable for the community, for your customers.
Yes.
But you also have to make money. And like you said, the rents and the insurance and the labor costs and all these expenses of running a business. How do local restaurants afford to stay affordable, stay priced within what their customers, expect and will accept,
right?
And not push away, people who've been coming to the restaurant for a long time, but also make money. Anyways, I don't know if it was a question in there, but it's just one of those things that I always think about.
So Hopley really represents a restaurant that is for the community.
Yeah.
And in 2020, 2021, there was a COVID tax. New York City restaurants were allowed to charge an extra 10%.
Yes.
And Hopley has and still has a prefix lunch set fee. It always has a complimentary homemade house soup. And then generally it's a rice dish with some sort of stir fry. And back in 2021, the price of that lunch was $5.95. Right. Already back in 2021, that price was as ridiculous as it is now.
Yeah.
You just think, how are they making money? So they were allowed to charge an extra 59 cents. And the manager, Johnny, said to me, we're not charging that because we don't want to scare our customers. Yeah. We don't want to alienate them.
Yeah.
An extra 59 cents is going to be too much for our customers. So lots of people in Chinatown live below the poverty line. This restaurant, oftentimes when you go, you see a lot of old timers.
Yeah.
You see, there's always, during the weekday, I often see a table just for the local school teachers and a table for the local postal workers.
Right. But this is what it's about. They're more than just a place you go buy a meal. They're part of that social community fabric.
Yes.
And that's why they're so important.
Exactly.
Because of that consciousness of understanding who is your core guest. And we don't want to scare them off. We want it to be a welcoming place. And sometimes that comes at, I don't want to say the expense of the business, although it does, but it is these types of decisions that people make to be and remain part of the community. So on those, so you mentioned that, the dish we were talking about with the pickled mustard greens. Are there other, when you're going out and eating, I'm sure this is like everyone always asks you, what are a couple of your favorite dishes when you're out Chinese restaurant that you're ordering?
Oh my gosh. So in Chinatown, oftentimes people are always thinking just Chinese restaurants. I love a restaurant called Pastor Grill.
Oh,
Pastor Noodle and Grill.
I
Oh my
think I
gosh,
know.
Pastor Grill. It's
Okay.
on Baxter Street, and it is New York City's oldest Vietnamese restaurant. And that restaurant has a classic Vietnamese dish. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. I believe it's bun roi,
Okay.
which would be BUNRIEU or REIU. And it is a noodle crab meat soup, which is homemade.
Yeah.
I've been in the kitchen. They make their broths every day and they cook them 9 hours. The kitchen is the size of a postage stamp, and they have these 2 giant vats going with the bones and the broth, and you taste the difference.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a junkie for this soup.
Wow.
This noodle soup.
Well, I may
It is
become
so
one
good.
as well. I'm going to have to go check it out. I'm always fascinated, just like New York City restaurant kitchens, how tiny so many of them are. Do you think, like, how? Like, how are you producing this food in that small space and often cranking it out, when they get busy? It's amazing. But that's the thing too, there's so many flavors, so many people from different places, different backgrounds have come to New York.
Another little miracle jewel. It's not a restaurant. It's called Quay Cafe.
Okay.
And they can seat like 3 people indoors. And oftentimes, especially in the summer, there's a table or 2 outdoors. But the woman, Veronica, who is the owner, it's a one-woman show.
Wow.
And she specializes in desserts. But she always makes one savory dish. And she's only open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 12 to 7.
Wow.
So sometimes she'll do a chicken rongdang or yeah, it's amazing. And then the selection of sweets, she changes the menu every week. So it's more work for her.
Yeah.
But she has this artistic soul that she doesn't want to just make the same thing all the time, which is the key for being a profitable business, right? You just have this like formula going and you're just cranking out whatever your specialty is day after day. But she's always changing it up.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. So for like the Lunar New Year, she's been making pineapple tarts where she takes fresh pineapple, cooks it down 5 hours. So it's a pineapple concentrated jam, and then fills this beautiful little baby tart pastry.
Well, it's a passion, yes, it's a business, but it's a passion. I was thinking when we had the dinner not too long ago, and the owner and his daughter of Grand Tea Imports.
Yes.
You said such a beautiful, you were talking about their business and the history, and it was so just beautiful the way you spoke about them. But that was not a restaurant, but a tea business. But I remember the gentleman was speaking and just his passion for tea. Yes, it's this business, and now his daughter, I think he has 2 daughters.
Alice and Karen. Yes.
Have really helped kind of grow and, evolve the business and support it. But listening to him, yes, it was a business, but his passion for tea came through. And again, more than just like commerce, he wanted people to learn about the different teas, where they came from, how they were produced, why he is serving them. And I think that is what people really connect with.
Yeah, the humanity. And think about the fact that now when people sometimes buy tea, they go to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or Costco and they buy this box and it's in tea bags, right? And if they want to ask a question, there's no one who's informed, right? When you go to Chinatown and you go to one of these mom and pop businesses, it's a reminder of our humanity, this connection with people who are willing to teach you and share with you their knowledge of why this tea is special.
Yeah. And then you also bring it home and you tell the stories. They have, I I don't know if they're called the tea pellets, but they were the compressed
Yes.
ones, and you put in the water, and then, they open up. And, it also, not everyone's seen one of those. They're just maybe used to the tea bag. So, you do it, and then, it opens up a conversation for a story about, oh, well, where did you get this? And where's it from? And I haven't seen tea like this before, whatever it is. It really helps further a conversation. What's better than sitting with friends or family and a cup of tea and having those types of conversations? And the same thing happens around, restaurant tables or tables, at home when you're all eating together.
And Grand Tea is really a wonderful shop because it's multi-generational.
Yes.
Like in this country, America, small businesses mom and pop used to be the backbone of this country, right? But how often now do you see a multi-generational business?
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned to you or mentioned to everyone that night at the dinner, they're open 365 days a year. They don't take a day off.
Yeah.
The mother and father are there every day. Alice and her sister have full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And when they're done with their full-time jobs, they come to the store.
Yeah.
That level of dedication and passion is just unheard of these days.
Well, when Alice was talking about it, she really was able to convey both in her words, but also just those emotions, that kind of the energy that comes through, why she was working so hard at the business as well and trying to carry on that generation business. How do you find these businesses, these restaurants, these tea shops? I'm always fascinated by, I have a process. Obviously, I'm from New York, so I know how I kind of go around and, visit, or people tell me, make recommendations. But if I go to a new city, for example, I always want to ask a taxi driver, where do you go and grab your, lunch or really late night dinner, and try to get those recommendations from locals. Over the years, how have you found places like, a Hop Lee or, the Grand Tea Imports? Do you just stroll the streets and go in and out of places? Do you have a method?
I have to confess, before COVID, I did not eat in Chinatown very often.
Oh, wow.
When I would go back to San Francisco for the Lunar New Year, for my father's birthday, then we would go into China and we knew all the owners. So I was sort of born and raised in San Francisco, Chinatown, and we have very, very deep connections to that Chinatown. But here I was in Chinatown all the time shopping, but I'm a cookbook author.
Yeah.
I want people to cook from my cookbooks.
Sure.
But when I saw Chinatown become a ghost town overnight in January of 2020, I was just stunned.
Yeah.
In my lifetime, I never, ever dreamed that we could lose Chinatown.
Yeah.
And in the summer of 2020, after lockdown, we lost so many businesses. In the first 2 years, we lost 150 businesses.
Tragic.
And there were so many days that I walked into Chinatown and it would just be quiet.
Yeah.
Nobody was there. So I saw the very real possibility of what was happening. And so I always say to people, during that period when you could only buy takeout, I've never eaten so much takeout in my entire life. And lots of people that I know introduced me to certain restaurants. There was a wonderful man named Don Lee who has since passed away. And he was a friend of Hop Lee and brought me in there to introduce me to Johnny. And Don Lee was an extraordinary man for the community. But during college, he used to work in the kitchen, right? So he learned to be a chef. So he knew all the guys in the back. He brought me into this little, it's the oldest coffee shop in Manhattan's Chinatown called Meesum, Meesum on Pell Street. And it dates from 1967. I'm ashamed. I never noticed it before. And when you walk by it, the front of Meesum, it's a little tattered, right? But it's also like this amazing soul of Chinatown.
Wow.
And the owner, Don Lee, prides himself in not raising the prices.
Yeah.
So when you walk into Mesa, the original cash registers are there, right? They don't take credit cards. Hop Lee doesn't take credit cards. Nobody has a website.
Yeah.
I think Hop Lee might have a website, but there's just like screenshots of a menu from 15 years ago, so the prices aren't even accurate. And nobody's doing social media, although I think a friend of a friend is doing social media for Hop Lee, but not Mesa. And somehow I love it. You know, there's something really beautiful about stepping back in time and being in a business that doesn't give a damn about doing a post on social media and having it go viral and having, you know, judging how many followers they have.
They're just authentically them,
it's
you know,
real.
And it's like you said, you know, stepping, you know, back in time. I want to talk a little bit more about that, but I was thinking when you said, you know, the pandemic, I remember, I forget what date it was. I probably actually have a photo. It was January of 2020. And that was when, before, I mean, there's no COVID in the US yet, but we were seeing in TV what was going on. I guess, you know, it was China and Italy, and people had stopped going to Chinatown. And Ming Lam, who's the owner of Jing Fan Bang restaurant, called a meeting, and I was invited. It was a handful of restaurateurs from you know, Chinatown, and trying to figure out how can we get people to come. I mean, if people just, you know, the streets were quiet, people weren't going out to restaurants. And then there was a little campaign, I think it was Mayor de Blasio at the time and other government officials were saying, everyone go to Chinatown, go support business. And that's before we really knew that, you know, what would happen with the pandemic. We shouldn't be all together inside. And then I was away, and I was actually in Seattle when at a conference, the first case of COVID that hit the US, and then came back to New York and had another meeting with a bunch of restaurants in Chinatown, some of the surrounding areas. And who could have imagined the devastation of the next, you know, few years? And it's still lingering for many of those businesses. But I want to just give you a sincere thanks and credit, because I always say, you know, a lot of people say a lot of things, and I always say, you know, don't talk about it, be about it. And it was remarkable in the depths of such horror of the pandemic, and all the doom and gloom. But there were real leaders and voices that arose. And I think you really were, along with some others, talking about the importance of Chinatown, the family-owned businesses, the stories, the cuisines that really needs to be not only saved, but cherished and, you know, continued on. And, you know, thank you for being one of those voices.
Thank you. I appreciate the generous praise. And I feel lucky that I was able to do what I was able to do. And one of the most powerful experiences during this period for me was on Friday, March 13th, the director of Poster House Museum, Julia Knight, contacted me. I didn't know who she was. I was supposed to do some lectures because they had a Chinese poster exhibition that had just opened. And she contacted me by phone and said, we're all home. All the museums are closed. We know Chinatown is hurting. What can we do to help?
Wow.
So this complete stranger
just reached out to you.
Just reached out. And I said that I had this idea that I wanted to interview restaurant and shop owners in Chinatown and post these interviews on social media, and that maybe it would rally support for New Yorkers, by New Yorkers. And she said, if you do these interviews, we'll put them on Poster House's website, and they're still there. The videos are called Coronavirus Chinatown Stories. And thanks to one of the locals, Jan Lee, we ended up interviewing Peter Lee, who owns Hop Key, which is across the street from Hop Lee, which are often confused.
And kind of a same block or next block of Wohop.
Exactly. And Hop Key normally has a line out the door. And that day when we arrived to do this interview on March 15th, Sunday, March 15th, there was only one table that was occupied.
Wow.
And this gentleman, Don Lee, that I mentioned, and Jan Lee were there. And when we spoke to Peter, he said, I have to close tomorrow.
Wow.
Like, business has been bad since January. We can't go on losing money every day. And it's heartbreaking to think of letting go of my employees, because many of them have been with him for decades.
Yeah, it's like a family. He
brought us into the kitchen, and I've been in millions of Chinese kitchens. They're always noisy. You can't hear anything. Yeah. There's the stir frying. There's the chopping of like the vegetables or the meat. It's just a cacophony of sounds. It was silent, right? And I remember looking at the eyes of the cooks, the dishwashers, the waiters, and thinking to myself, everybody knows we're in trouble. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. And these guys can't speak up for themselves. Yeah. They can't do an interview with the media. They can't get word out that Chinatown is in trouble. And how will they get a job in the middle of a pandemic? Yeah. How will they get a new job? How will they pay their rent? How will they get food on the table? And this was just happening everywhere. Yeah. And so I was lucky as a cookbook author. I had some contacts in the media. And so I don't like to speak up. Yeah. I'm a very quiet person. I have no experience as an activist or an advocate, but I had
like
to.
An accidental advocate.
Yes.
You know, you have no choice, and a situation presents itself, and then, you know, using the opportunity to be a voice for people, and often for people who may not have a voice otherwise. And that's what we were doing, you know, day in, day out. Like you said, restaurants were closed, you know, people weren't going out. But people had to earn money, and that's why it was the takeout and delivery. And then, you know, finally with the outdoor dining, we worked with the Rockwell Group and some others with the hospitality lines to help fund the open street on Mott Street.
Which was gorgeous.
All of the outdoor dining. And if you remember, it also brought out all like local schools and people from the community to paint all the outdoor dining structures. And I think, you know, in times of horror and doom and gloom, you know, there's also this beautiful community that comes together. And, you know, we were told for so long we had to be socially distant, but restaurants and around food is where we come together to socialize.
Right.
And doing the outdoor dining, and over time getting people to come back out safely and be together was, you know, so important. Because people have to work. People need the humanity of being together.
I didn't realize you were behind that. Yes. And that was one of the most uplifting moments when I came into Chinatown and saw all these outdoor stalls that had been, and they were beautiful with the hand painting.
Yes, that was all, it was incredible. We did 5, 6, 7, I forget. We did a couple in each borough, in different neighborhoods, and really tried to kind of customize it to the different neighborhoods that really, you know, needed it. And it was really, you know, beautiful to see, especially during that time, because I think it, you know, brought hope. It also showed people that other people, not only in the community, but from other communities, are thinking about them.
Because how would Chinatown have done outdoor dining? No restaurant had the capacity to figure this out. And some restaurants only had enough room for 3 tables. Yeah. Right. There were restaurants elsewhere in Manhattan where they had 20 tables, right? Because of the way the neighborhood
Chinatown,
was.
The sidewalks are so small. So when you're able to do, you know, the street, and people, you know, could get close, but also be socially distant, and, you know, all the changing rules and regulations of that time, you know, but also then trying to get, you know, businesses support, because I always said during the pandemic that, you know, New York City would never recover unless New York City's restaurants were at the core of the recovery, because it was the jobs. It was the storefront businesses that people see, that they love, that they're connected to, that they go to, their family, their grandparents, you know, would go to. And sometimes the worst of times brings out, you know, the best of, you know, so many people. But I guess, like you said, a lot of the businesses are still, you know, feeling the impact, even though it's been, years ago?
So congestion pricing began in Manhattan in January of 2025, and nobody talks about how it's negatively impacted Chinatown. Many of the restaurant and shop owners have told me, so these are not official statistics, but they've told me business is down 30 to 40%. Wow. So all of these families or people who would normally have driven in from Queens, Brooklyn, possibly New Jersey, I don't know, aren't doing it now. So $9 is a lot of money. And nowadays there are Asian markets, Asian restaurants outside of the city. This is not the must destination, must come destination. In the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, outside of Manhattan's Chinatown, there was nothing.
Sure.
So all of these people that grew up outside of Manhattan's Chinatown would say to me, oh, my parents would drag me in, right? Yep. We had to do the shopping. We had to have dim sum, all these things. But nowadays, the necessity of coming in is not there.
Yeah.
And so congestion pricing has really hurt Manhattan's Chinatown.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating to me how I look at hyper local issues that impact small business in one community. But then you also zoom out, and that same concept, in a sense, applies in so many ways, not just New York City, but when you think about New York City compared to other cities, it used to be if you were a cook, a chef, you wanted to open a restaurant, you had to do it in New York City,
right.
Particularly in Manhattan. But there are so many great restaurant cities around the country where the rules and regulations and red tape don't exist like they do in New York City. These regulatory burdens, the rents. So you can have a great restaurant, a family-owned restaurant, and the cost of living, which we were talking about as well, for both the business owners and the workers is a lot lower. And you're seeing people who have left New York City or don't come in to Manhattan because they can do something in their own neighborhood, their own city, their own town, their own state. And I really, really believe that our government officials need to recognize those challenges that our small businesses face in Chinatowns around New York City, but all these other neighborhoods as well, and really enact policies to support these small businesses, to uplift them, to give them opportunities. So,
I'll vote for you.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, mom and pop businesses are not, no one seems to have the compassion to understand how all of these challenges are making surviving impossible.
Yeah, I think like everything, it's a it's a balance, but at the core, it's just being conscious that these are not only businesses, but it's the lives and the stories behind those businesses that really matter. And
that Chinatown is such an important part of this city and this country.
Absolutely.
And what would we be without Chinatown? Right? It gives us cultural diversity and richness. I think I always say go to Chinatown not just for the restaurants, but also the markets, the bakeries, the shops.
So
you can
many
find
cool
everything there, from florist shops to hardware stores, the best dentists, doctors, pharmacies. It's a complete living neighborhood, right?
Yeah. Oh, I had a foot massage too, which was it was incredible. But that's what I mean. You can go and just the whole, a whole day experience, because you can go eat, but then you go into the tea shop, you go into the little retail shop, the little massage place. There's just so many unique, interesting businesses. And you look around and you just go in and there's just so much cool stuff that, you really may not see or get to experience. And I think it adds texture to your life.
Because the rest of the city now is becoming another CVS, another Trader Joe's, another Whole Foods, and the sameness. And you walk into these stores and you can walk in and out and even check yourself out. And you have never spoken to a human being, right?
Yeah.
So, but I also want to mention, I'm always advocating for the old legacy businesses. But in Chinatown during COVID, 5 childhood friends from Chinatown opened up 2 different restaurants. The first was the first was Potluck Club.
Yes.
Have you been?
Yes.
And then they opened like a year or 2 after that, Phoenix Palace. And they're both very, very special restaurants. And the story behind these restaurants that, childhood friends who love the neighborhood and realize that they want to invest back into the neighborhood. So they support the local businesses and buy the vegetables and the meat and the noodles all locally. Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's a community. I always look at these things. It's like a community and civic duty that we have. And it's so inspiring when you see the next generation, recognize where they came from, those traditions that they need to keep strong, keep, teaching other people about, but also doing it in their own modern way, know? And that's what I was talking about. Kind of, it's that balance. So you've done so much, important, interesting work. And I feel like, even when we started the conversation, like the different awards and everything, but what for you personally doing this work, both from, the cookbooks and, the videos about the Wok Therapy and then, working with these different organizations in Chinatown, helping support local restaurants and the other businesses. What have you gotten personally out of this experience? Like, what are the things that you think about? You're like, wow, I just feel so fortunate that I've been able to experience this or meet this person.
I mean, what happened to me during these last couple of years of becoming this accidental voice for Chinatowns is it's an unbelievable story.
Yeah.
I saw a side of myself come out that I didn't even know existed, that I could be a gritty grassroots organizer. I had no plan. I had no strategy. But I was always responding to whatever was coming at me. And in the process, I used to come into Chinatown all the time, but I didn't really have relationships with different owners or workers. And in helping out people, I became a member of the community. And in this day and age, community is such an important part of what gives us a foundation, a richness to our lives, right? So I've become friends with different people in Chinatown. I am far from knowing every business and every person in Chinatown, but just the people that I have developed relationships has really enriched my life enormously. There was a period at the start of the pandemic where Manhattan was the epicenter of America, where we were losing 800 people a day dying. And I am easily scared. I'm easily a person who worries. I think if I hadn't focused my energies on Chinatown, I would have been in Bellevue, right? The sound of the sirens, the ambulances constantly, that was intense. But by just focusing on little things, right? I was getting takeout and groceries for elderly friends who were sheltering in place from Chinatown. I was focused on that. I was focused on doing a post about reminding people to shop at KK Discount or helping out a little bakery. And I think that all those things just add up, right? And you don't have to do big things in life. It's a reminder. During the pandemic, my friend Linda Pagan reminded me that Desmond Tutu said, do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world.
Beautiful.
And I think that in these times that we're living in right now, you look at the news and you can easily feel overwhelmed and what can I do? It's beyond me. But just focus on helping your neighbor or somebody in need. And that's the best thing that you can do for yourself and for the community.
Well, I'm sure I'm not alone in thanking you for not succumbing to your fears and standing up and being that advocate and sharing those stories and sharing those wisdom and just being there just to help people out, especially in their time of need. So it's wonderful. Everyone should go to Manhattan, Chinatown, but every Chinatown around New York City and around the country and around the globe, and, go experience it if you haven't. Go reclaim experiences that you have had before that you loved, and support the local businesses. And, we said, don't talk about it, be about it. And it was so nice to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And thank you for reminding people, because if we don't support these communities now, these Chinatowns that we love so much, they will not be here in the future.
My guest, Grace Young, thank you so much for coming on Hospitality and Politics. Show is powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. I'm Andrew Ridgie, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.